So I don't know where you would like to start, but if you
Oh,
want
well,
me to just kinda go through what I have and
I was wondering
I
if we
was
could just
wondering if you
start
could
it out
start it
quick
out
with
with
kinda like your background with Access
Mhm,
and talking about, like, when you started and doing maybe, like, a little bit of an overview of your career
mhm,
here.
okay. Well, I started as a volunteer, um, prior to 1983. I moved to Madison in 1978, and I was working as a personal care attendant for someone with post-polio, and he and I volunteered together. Um, as I recall, I was thinking about it today, as I recall, my first job was operating one of those plastic binder machines to bind some kind of books, manuals or something that we were giving out to people. So that was a weird thing to remember from that far back. To be honest, sometimes I don't remember a lot of things, but no, that was so that was one of my first kind of volunteer things. And then there was we had an attendant services program at that time and a part-time clerical aid position open up in 1983. And in November of 1983, I started as a clerical aide for the attendant services program at $4.50 an hour, which I think today would be, I don't know, maybe $12 an hour or something like that. But in those days, that was, you know, um, so, and I have worn a lot of hats over that time. Did the clerical aid position for quite a while. And then that was at that point became half-time, and then uh, a housing coordinator position opened up. At that time, we were more specialists, and so we had a housing specific position. And someone that had been in that position when I first moved to Madison um, said I should apply for it. I hadn't really thought about it, but I went ahead and applied, and I was hired for the housing position that eventually became full time. And so I did that for several years. I think I did some general IL, when we moved to a more generalist model. I was a deaf and hard of hearing services coordinator for about a year and a half, somewhere in there. I was the assistant director for about 6 years, and went back to being kind of general independent living services. And then a few years ago, kind of more of a focus on information and referral. So I did a lot of work in Columbia County for a few years as as our kind of representative in Columbia County, and that was interesting. Got to know Columbia County pretty well, and we hosted some events in Columbia County with the McKinsey Environmental Education Center. We did a couple events there for people that were kind of interesting events, um, but no, it's gone by fast. At the same time, it does seem like a long time. But, uh,
Yeah, you've really worn quite a few hats.
oh yeah, oh yes, oh yes. But I started in this work. I was an English major. I never finished college, but I was an English major with a minor in psychology and sociology. And then I became a certified peer specialist in 2012, I believe that was. So so that was another kind of wrinkle, and I did do some peer specialist work in Columbia County. Um, we had a contract with them for a little while to do that kind of work. So that's another hat.
Yeah.
Lots of lots of hats. So
What do you think if we went off script real quick, what do you think draws you to this work? Or what do you think keeps you here for 40 years?
um the sense of community, I think sometimes the knowing some people for as long as I have. I met with somebody today that I've known probably for 30 years and worked with in different capacities. Um, and I had a phone call from someone else that I've known, for over the years. It's really kind of rewarding when I run into somebody in the community and they are like, "You help me find my apartment." Like, 15 years ago, there was one like that a few years ago and you remember those things when that you've had that kind of impact on somebody's life. So I think I think I've always felt that it's about building community among people with disabilities. So
That's pretty incredible, Tracy.
other people, oh, so
Okay, well, now that we've kind of started to dig in a little bit, did you have a couple questions that jumped out to you that you kind of wanted to
um,
focus in?
well, you'd asked about how the agency's changed, and the kind of apocryphal story is we started with the card table and 4 folding chairs and 4 women. So uh, back in the late 70s, and I knew all 4 of those women and worked with them, and so when I came on board, and I found an article from a newsletter that I had done back in 2014 for, it was Women's History Month, and I kind of shared some of the women who had been the driving force behind Access in those early days, and so that's changed. We've grown a lot, we've changed a lot. Um, some things that have remained consistent again are just some of the same people that come back that need our services off and on over years and know that they can come back and get services that they need. And people are kind of surprised that I'm still here. Since we announced about this anniversary, I've been getting getting uh, people congratulating me on my retirement because they're assuming that nobody sticks around that long without retiring. But hey, I'm still here. So, and Shar told me, no, you're not retired. not now. so, so I guess as long as I'm still useful, I'll still be here. So memorable moments were the things that I was thinking about, the visits from people like Justin Dart, who visited us when he was pushing for the passage of the ADA, and Judy Human visited us. I think she was the OSER's assistant director at that time. And we had, there was a group that came and filmed a panel discussion with a woman named Beatrice Wright, who I at that time didn't know very much about, but she was a groundbreaking rehabilitation psychologist who she really challenged the medical model of rehabilitation. And she spent her retirement years here in Madison, and it was really an honor to meet her and learn some things from her about her perspective. So, and then in 1991, the Federal Fair Housing Amendments Act was passed, and we had a partnership with the Fair Housing Council to help with training all 8 centers on these new protections that people had, these housing protections that people had, including, it was really the first time that the design of the built environment had become kind of a factor in civil rights law. And then in 1992, in October, I helped to plan what we believe is like the first conference on fair housing and disability any place in the country. So as far as we know, that may have been a first for actually having a conference that focused on fair housing and disability. So that I'm really proud of. Again, that's one of the accomplishments that I'm proud of, as well as the most memorable times at Access. So, and then, more recently, this partnership with Yoga Accessible for All has been really rewarding for me and exciting for me. So,
Yeah, could you talk a little bit about that partnership?
about the YAFA partnership?
Yeah.
Yes. YAFA's been around for quite a while. And this past year, we were able to connect with them and do a series of yoga classes for people who are deaf or hard of hearing. And we're hoping to replicate the class again in the spring. And that was very popular. The community, the deaf and hard of hearing community, really responded to that and enjoyed it. And YAFA's mission is so close to ours in terms of just making and for them, it's just focused on making yoga accessible for people with any type of disability, any kind of background. And so I'm very excited because I've been asked to be on their advisory board. So
Oh,
I
congrats. I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Oh,
so
very
that's
cool.
new. That's something new. They're going to have their first meeting on December 11th, so I'm really looking forward to that.
Mm.
And again, it's just a great connection, and I have been wanting to work with them for years. I've been kind of following what they're doing, and so it's very exciting to have kind of developed this partnership with them. Um, and Iris Mickey, who was their one of their co-founders, we honored her with a Relentless Badger Award this year at Independent Living Days. And again, because of her work, the type of work that she does with making yoga accessible for anybody of any background and any type of disability, it's kind of an exciting partnership to be involved with. So.
Oh, well, just congrats again. Your portfolio of hats just keeps growing, Tracy.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I haven't served on a board in quite a long time. I was on the board of Cornucopia for about 6 years, and really grew in that role and kind of bringing more supports and resources for people with mental health challenges that they do as an arts and wellness center. They're kind of a unique peer-run center that they focus on the arts. And so that was an exciting time, and I learned a lot too from that. And and that's one of the things I also think that keeps me engaged is that it's a constant learning process. There's always something new to find out and learn about people and supports for people. So
Yeah, I know
so
that everybody around here goes to you when they need resources. They know that you're a wealth of information. And a lot of times I'll hear, I don't know, I think I'll ask Tracy though.
well, I've soaked up a lot of this in the 40 years from just seeing success for people, and unfortunately sometimes that can take a long time. Or there's someone that I worked with who was on a waiting list for a Section 8 voucher for over 6 years before she was able to get it. But to see somebody finally get what they need from and um having some involvement in that, some small role to play in helping that come about for people is really that's where I get the sense of accomplishment for the work.
So you talked about a couple like consumer related success stories. Do you have any other ones that kind of stick out to you?
Oh wow. um so it's a
I'm sure
long
you have so
career.
many.
um Specific consumer stories. um well, that's I think again those relationships that where there's a peer support aspect to it are memorable. um I've lost a lot of people, and one thing that I remember, and you're going to make me cry, is that there was a woman that I worked with who had an incomplete spinal cord injury, and she lived with chronic pain, and she took her own life. And her mother called me and said she had left a list of people that she wanted to thank for supporting her, and I was on that list. And something like that sticks with you, that you've made an impact in somebody's life. So
Oh wow,
I'm
yeah, that
counting
is
today
incredible.
anyway. So it's probably just not
I'm sorry.
margins, but
Oh.
no. And you remember the people that you've lost, um, but you also remember that the impact that you might have had on the time that you were with them. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
but those peer support relationships to me, are some of the most memorable. And it's not any kind of one thing. I mentioned the person who was able to get her Section 8 voucher after many years on the waiting list. Um, and but I think sometimes it is what's memorable to me are the day-to-day interactions with being able in the moment to be able to be there for somebody and be able to give them some hope where they maybe don't feel like they're getting that from other places. So sorry,
Yeah.
that was sad. I didn't mean to
No,
say
Tracy. Thank you for sharing that. That is really powerful. Yeah, that's very
Yeah,
touching.
yeah, yeah. But it's
Um,
hard when you do lose people that you're close to.
I
And
can
especially
imagine. Well, you're spending a lot of time with people and you sharing like really intimate details, about your
Yep.
lives and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of times that's true. So
Well, what if
um
we switch to something something much broader? And I don't know if you have like a concise answer, probably not, because I feel like it's kind of a big question. But if you had to summarize for somebody like what the challenges within the IL movement happen to be currently, or maybe some of the bigger issues that people are facing, could you talk a
mhm.
little bit about that?
Yeah, and sadly to me, I've been noticing that a lot of these issues are the same as they were over 40 years ago when I first started working as a personal care worker in 1977, 76, 77. I came down to Madison with a friend, the person that I ended up living with and caring for 8 years, for a sit-in at the state office building on, wages and benefits for personal care workers. So, and that issue is still, it's huge. As our population is getting older, the need for people who provide care is just getting bigger and bigger, and the pool of people who are available, willing, able to do that kind of work is shrinking. Um, and that's one of the biggest challenges for people, I think, with physical disabilities who rely on personal care services. And it's still there after 40 years. We used to joke about our job was to put us out of business, to make everything accessible and perfect for people with disabilities so nobody would need us, but we're still needed. The independent living movement is still very necessary for people. um, so that's a huge issue. Housing was an area, a specialty area for me for many years. And I still, have some expertise in housing, but the housing market, especially in our area, has gotten so tight and challenging for anybody on a fixed income that, that is, a huge challenge. How do we address that issue, because housing is a basic need for everybody, and especially anyone who's lower income, which most of the folks with disabilities that we're working with, 1 in 4 people who qualify for uh, rent assistance get it, and the rest are just struggling. And so, what those are advocacy issues that maybe we can see too as opportunities. What can we be doing to increase? Many years ago, I worked with a group that we're still involved with, the Affordable Housing Action Alliance, and we worked very hard to get Section 8 made to be viewed as a lawful source of income in Dane County. So landlords couldn't deny somebody on that basis, that just because they had a Section 8 voucher. So that's another thing that I'm very proud of, is that kind of advocacy work that we were able to do. Um, but it's still a challenge even for people that have that assistance to be able to find housing that meets within the limits, the rent limits for the program, and that accepts people. The um, unfortunately, the criteria that landlords are setting for people of, sometimes minimum income requirements, and sometimes a minimum credit score, can be challenging. But so those are probably some of the biggest, advocacy issues and challenges that we're facing as a independent living movement. So
Yeah. So you mentioned working with the Affordable Housing Action Alliance. And that it seems like was successful in and trying to get Section 8 recognized as income.
Mhm.
Were there any other like accomplishments within like your advocacy work or like the agency's advocacy work or like other like big successes like that since your time working here?
Well, our partnership with the Fair Housing Council, again, I mentioned that we worked with them on Fair Housing Initiatives project grant to do training on the Fair Housing Act guidelines and requirements back in the early 90s. And in 1991, they gave me an award for as one of their Fair Housing Advocates of the year that year. And and just I worked a lot with with different organizations that were developing housing, like on housing committees that were working to develop different housing projects over that. Back in the late 80s, early 90s, I did a lot of that kind of work, sitting on committees and providing feedback on what people's needs were for housing. So I have a couple mementos in my office of from my involvement in those. I remember one of them, one of those. I think when it was when the housing was going up and on East Washington, um, they gave us a golden shovel. That was the groundbreak. They had different shovels for the groundbreaking, and so I had for a long time I had a shovel at home that was painted gold. I actually used it in the garden. I probably still have it around somewhere, but I have little mementos from working with those organizations on actually, and that was, again, that was it was important work. And again, we're kind of trying to refocus and figure out what can we be doing more with developers and making sure that there is adequate housing for folks that we're working with. So a lot of those memories are tied together with housing. um, and also several years ago, um, I got invited to have lunch with three people who were part of kind of the early independent living movement here in the Madison area. And two of them were people who had had post polio. And these two women who were part of kind of our the organization that was behind us, and getting us started. And I asked them how they met. And they started talking about how they had met in the the polio ward of the Madison Children's Hospital in 1955. And they talked about how, and I was like, I've got to get this on, somehow get this on tape. And I was able to meet with them again and have my partner at the time, Fred, who's passed on in 2009, but he was able to videotape an interview with them, and I interviewed them and talked about what that experience was like for them. They were like 15 and 13 years old, and it was all about peer support. And that was kind of, to me, that was where the seed of access was planted, was way before 1955, before I was born. So one of them is still alive. The other person that was part of the interview, within a few months, she had passed away kind of suddenly. But that experience of hearing those stories and learning, and it really brought home to me the importance of peer support to independent living. That's kind of where the seed of everything that we're doing was planted, was the two of them kind of looking out for each other in that environment that was so strange and so different. They talked about how the iron lungs, when the power would go out, they had students that would come and power them with bicycles, which I never thought about that. But when the power went out, people couldn't breathe. And they talked about how there was one of the iron lungs that if somebody was in it, sometimes a door would pop open unexpectedly and they'd lose their breath. So somebody else would kind of be watching and holler for the nurses if that happened. So yeah, but learning about those experiences and what people went through, and one of those people I still have contact with, Faith Kale, one of the mothers of our local independent living movement. And she talks about everything that they, when they came out of the hospital, nothing was accessible. She had to go to a residential school. The schools weren't accessible, the communities, even their homes had to be made accessible. So all of the work that they did is what I'm still, benefiting from, and what we're all still benefiting from, because they kind of had to start from scratch to make the world more accessible. So we have such a great debt uh, to them for all the work that they did. So
Wow. Yeah,
and,
that's really incredible, actually. It's really cool that you stay
yeah,
in contact with Faith then?
I do. I don't see her often enough, but I have still been in touch with her. And
That is so cool.
so yeah, I think she's going to be 77 or 78. So yeah, and again, the lifespan for people with post polio sometimes is much shorter, but
Mhm.
she is persisting, and that's a wonderful thing. We did for her 75th birthday, we did a surprise party for her. I kind of helped plan that, and had a lot of speakers, and some of them were former mayors of Madison.
Oh my
People
gosh.
know
Mhm.
her, there are a lot of
Yeah.
people that know Faith and know of the work that she's done. So again, my contributions kind of pale sometimes, in comparison to the longevity of someone like Faith. But again, that's what gives me strength, is seeing that somebody can stick with things that long and still be working for accessibility and for equality. So,
What do you think the future of IL looks like?
hmm, I think um, intersectionality is really important. We're not just one identity, but we all have multiple identities, and I think that uh, unfortunately, the movement has been mostly led by white people, and that uh, I think now more people of color are getting more involved with the movement, which is really significant and important. Um, I think our strength comes from diversity and from getting more younger people with disabilities involved too. Uh, because again, we're running out of steam. Some of us that have been in this movement for a really long time, and we need to get more younger people on board and involved with moving things forward. And we have the ADA, and we have legislation, but I think the trend now is more toward disability justice, toward a broader definition for more people. Um, I'm just really interested in, as a former English major, in language, and um, we used to always talk about how it's people first language. You have to put the person before the disability, but there are a lot of younger people now who are putting their identity before, and putting it out there, and having a sense of disability pride. I worked with this past year with a group of folks that plan autism conference by and for people with autism, and autistic people. they're in that movement too, of being proud of being autistic, and not having to have that be secondary, that's part of their identity. And I think for me, as somebody who has multiple disabilities myself that are part of my identity, um, I think that's a really interesting perspective, because it's hard to separate our identities as people with disabilities from who we just are as people. And so I think that's a really positive movement. Um, it just, sharing our identities more openly and freely, and I think it leads to more acceptance. So that was kind of a long-winded answer.
I like it.
Yeah, I've been fascinated with some of the videos about identity first language that are out there. And I had an email from Erica from the Fair Housing Council that there's this group that does they have photos and drawings of people with disabilities that you can use without, they're, what does that mean? It's public domain or whatever, but
Oh,
they've
shit, like
developed
royalty free. Mhm.
basically that have more BIPOC and LGBTQ people in the photos, and in the directions for how to use them, they say if you're using captions, they want identity first language, and that was
Mm.
something new for Erica because she'd always heard, oh, you should always do use people first language. And so she emailed me about it. This was about 2 years ago or so. And I had this real interesting conversation with her, and that caused me to go online and do, watch some videos about people's feelings about that. And it really changed my perspective on that, to such a large extent, and made me think more about the challenges that I've had with my mental health issues, being able um, to separate that from just who I am as a human being. I've never been able to. I didn't identify as somebody with a disability for many years as a younger person, and yet I did um, struggle with those issues. So and eventually coming to that understanding and that acceptance um, made me realize that's just part of my identity. And it's not anything. It doesn't make me any less than, which I think a lot of people still um, see people that are different as somehow less than. But I think being more open about our identities will hopefully be able to change that. I think sometimes even ourselves as people with disabilities, we kind of um, accept that from the larger culture, that somehow because we're different, that we're somehow less than, and so it even becomes an internal kind of stigma, which is really the worst. When you kind of accept that yourself. So but there's so much out there now, and that's another really positive direction of independent living and the disability justice movement, is that there are people out there that are very proud of who they are and their accomplishments, and are showing the world what people with disabilities are able to accomplish. So there you go.
That's perfect.
Okay,
I I
take
just
what
have a
you want
couple.
from there. So yeah.
I will. I just have a couple more. I wonder if you do have, besides maybe run, if you did have some advice to give your younger self.
Well, be patient, listen. I've learned more over the years to sometimes to be quiet and listen. I think we don't um, we don't value that enough. Um, Being able to just to hear people. Um, I'll give an example of one person that I worked with for many years who had severe cerebral palsy and was very difficult to hear over the phone, to understand over the phone. And when he would call me, it would kind of force me to just stop what I was doing and just focus and listen. And um, and learning how to do that is so important. And I feel like that's something that this job has taught me. Um, and and two, doing information referral over the years, I would sometimes have a call from somebody who would share their story and their frustrations of whatever was going on, and I wouldn't have an answer, at least an immediate one, and yet they would say thank you. Um and at times it was just a thank you for hearing, for listening, for hearing somebody. So taking the time to hear and to really give people that opportunity to share whatever's on their mind. So
That's huge.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
we work with a lot of people who are very isolated, and sometimes even just being heard is significant for them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't know, Tracy, did you have anything else you want to talk about?
Uh, I don't think so. I'll probably think of things that I didn't say.
Well, if you want to send me an amendment to anything, you're welcome
One of the
to.
other memorable things is when we first moved to Atwood, we had a monthly potluck, and we would invite consumers to come, and we'd provide a birthday cake for whoever had a birthday that month. And sometimes we did live music, kind of spontaneous, um, and we have a picture of, I was going to possibly do some music with my friend Charles at this thing on the 7th, because we've been doing music together for years. One time, to publicize something that Access was, I think it was an open house, we did a thing on WORT when they were broadcasting from the breakfast place downtown. And so we did live music on the radio, which was scary. But as somebody who does live music, how that is. But I like singing, but I don't like singing in public. so, but I think those get-togethers were memorable for me because again, it was an opportunity for people to connect in a different way. And people don't bring their most positive selves to us, and how do we figure out a way to give them the opportunity to show their real more um, more positive sides and selves. So I think those kind of things, like when we have like an open house or an event where people can come and have fun, I think that's really important too. Fun is underrated. So,